Welcome to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold, giving you information and ideas on the investment that has turned more ordinary people into millionaires and billionaires than anything else, and can provide you with more wealth and happiness than you ever thought possible. Now, here's your host, investor, entrepreneur, business owner, and educator, Keith Weinhold.
Welcome to the Get Rich Education Podcast, show number 2. I am your host, Keith Weinhold. I am grateful that you have decided to join me today. On the last show, we discussed why and how to think more abundantly. It's foundational to growing your wealth. Rather than spending your efforts in cutting back your lifestyle, use those same efforts in learning how to increase income and do it using other people's money. We've been discussing that people spend a great deal of effort on how work works, how they can do their job better, yet they don't learn about how money works, but money is the number one reason that people work. At work, people commonly say, work smarter, not harder, right? And I've always kind of liked that. When you own your own real estate that produces positive cash flow where the rent income exceeds the expenses, that money shows up every month whether you stay in bed 30 days in a row or not. So rather than just applying work smarter, not harder between the lines at work, why not step back and look at things in a broader context and employ that in life? There's really 2 ways to look at how you spend your time. Are you focused on doing things right, or are you focused on doing the right things? So what's the difference? See, look, at your job, I hope you work productively and that you do things right, so that where possible, you do work smarter and not harder. But if you want to get ahead in life, in a larger sense, is being at work at all working smarter and not harder? See, at work, you might be doing things right. But are you doing the right thing at all by being there in the trading your time for dollars economy like most everyone else? We talked about how you don't necessarily want to be normal. The same is lame. If you keep doing what you've been doing, you won't get much more than what you've already got. But in the results-based economy, where you make your money work for you, or even better with real estate, make other people's money work for you, you are looking at your time in a more broad context, and I would offer to you that you are doing the right thing. So think less about trading your time for dollars where you need to work more hours in order to get more dollars. That's mere linear growth, and it's limiting. When you replace that mindset with vehicles where you're not only making your money work for you, you're making other people's money work for you, and you're spending comparatively little time doing it, you're not merely growing linearly, you're growing exponentially. So I suggest that doing the right thing is more important than doing things right. If you spend a week building a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet to track automobile inventory, you might be taking orders from a boss and have a view where you're down in the weeds. Metaphorically, maybe you're no better than 100 feet off the ground in one of those crop duster planes, maybe barely clipping the top of the tallest trees. Okay, but while you were building that spreadsheet, you didn't know that there's already an automated internet-based barcode program out there for doing this. Well, then you could have done everything right in building the spreadsheet, but you weren't doing the right thing. You weren't educated on the industry, and you didn't have that bigger picture view. We'll call it a 1,000-foot view from a bigger plane. Additionally, if you're at work and focused on competing for a promotion, a salary, a raise, or a wage increase, you may or may not get that, regardless of your merit. Sometimes those rewards are hard to attain. And then often the quote-unquote reward with a higher salary is just more work, more responsibility, and more resultant stress. So if you're currently working inside the wrong thing, then how much does it matter if you do any of those things right? So keep stepping back and taking a wider view. Try to fly higher. When you learn with little effort how to make other people's money work for you, you may no longer be working a traditional job at all. you're taking the 30,000-foot view from a 747 jet. Well, you need to get educated first. A plane spends time on a runway before it gets its lift. Why not consider learning about doing the right thing? Invest in an asset like a cash-flowing residential apartment building. You can get an instant quote-unquote raise, if you want to call it that, from the income left over each month after all of the expenses have been paid. How hard did you have to work for that raise? Arguably less hard than you would have had to at work. And you didn't need to play any office politics or ask for any bosses or hiring managers' permission. When you buy income real estate, you're also probably going to have both a better understanding of where your raise comes from, and you're going to have more control over it. Additionally, you didn't have to pick up any sort of degree or professional certification in order to give yourself this quote-unquote raise. So besides this higher income plan that you just gave yourself, you're simultaneously providing we can call it a savings plan, as real estate typically increases in value over time. Learning how to invest is the right thing. I mean, shoot, you could even do some things wrong in real estate, but as long as you're doing the right thing, you could still make out pretty well. So I would suggest that you don't live within your existing comfort zone. I don't really want you to work outside your comfort zone either, because you need to get educated, so it's really more about expanding your comfort zone. The real estate that I'm talking about is buy and hold real estate, and it requires so little knowledge and effort relative to the financial returns. With a conservative crunching of the numbers, for the properties I buy with careful market and property selection and a good property manager, I expect rates of return of at least 25 to 30% per year, and with less risk than stocks. All right, so what if you're working at a well-paying corporate job, but you don't like it, and you know that you enjoy something like teaching, and your gift might be there in teaching, but you can't afford the lower salary of teaching? Well, maybe having an extra $2,000 to $3,000 a month of passive cash flow will give you that cushion, that extra margin that you need to go teach. Then you're not doing more of what you want. It's not just that. It's that your gift of teaching is being shared with the world and the students and their parents, and the community benefits. That resource of your time, effort, and genius is now better allocated. What I'm talking about is passive investing. It means the money shows up whether you work or not. It's simply buy and hold for the long term. Passive means you're not working for it. It doesn't mean you're completely uninvolved. I trade 1 or maybe 2 emails per month with my property manager. It's not about flipping, which is buying a property in need of repair at a steep discount, fixing it up and selling it for more later. It's also not about wholesaling, which is securing a contract to buy a property usually below market value and then selling that contract to another buyer at a markup before you've even actually bought the property. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about buying and holding for the long term. Yeah, that's all it is. Buy and hold real estate. It's something that you inherently already understand a good bit of because you've seen it and interacted with it every day of your life. And that often takes less of your time and involvement than those other methods of real estate investing. It's about time, and it's about your return on time. Buy and hold is identifying a market, crunching what we call an APOD in the industry, APOD, annual property operating data. Some call it a profit and loss spreadsheet or a P&L where you have all the income and all the expenses for the property. It's crunching those numbers, making sure they look right, using a building inspector to identify any defects before you've bought the property, and then getting the seller to repair many of those defects before you buy at all, and buy that then at what's called the closing. Often the properties are already occupied with tenants on the day that you purchase. You receive rent income right away. That's how many begin. Think about the freedom that passive buy and hold real estate investing gives you. When you have a professional manager in place and the building's monthly income exceeds the monthly expenses, what's left over, that's positive cash flow, that follows you. Think about the power of that. Not only does that income occur whether you work for it or not, It finds you no matter where you live or move away to. That check from the property manager follows you. You've just made money follow you. Think about what most people do. They instead follow money. If your day job moved 50 miles away, would you keep going there and showing up? I mean, maybe you would. What if it moved to another state 500 miles away and you were transferred? What if you just want to leave your job to go chase a different position in another country or across the country? Do you really want to? You probably don't really want to. You need to. I mean, you need to uproot yourself and your family, move, buy new furniture to fit your new home. Your social connections are weakened. Your entire ecosystem and life infrastructure is disrupted because you're following money. Wouldn't you like to have the ability to make money follow you? Make that cash flow chase you down and find you. Life's too short to chase money around. Getting rich, get rich education is about so much more than money. It's about mastering money rather than being a money chaser. When you've made money follow you, you've mastered money. Life's too important to chase money around. When you master it and it finds you, you're untethered. You are unanchored at that point. I mean, do you know how freeing that feels for me and how freeing that's going to feel for you? So consider living where you want and building a passive income stream anywhere else that you want to. That's doing the right thing. When I bought my first ever property, a fourplex building back in 2002, I paid the full price of $295,000 for it. I didn't really know much about negotiating. I didn't know about much of anything. Well, 2 weeks later, someone bought an identical building right next to mine for only $275,000. That was an early lesson. I overpaid for the building. You know, I did more things wrong, like trusting one tenant to pay the rent ever later and later and later, and they never did. I inherited that tenant from the previous building owner, and I had to evict him, and I never got paid all the rent. I was single at the time, and at one point I rented a unit to 3 girls that were going to live right in the unit next to mine. Their chief qualification criterion is that they were attractive. Well, they hid a pet on me, and they partied so hard that the police showed up twice. I mean, I've made my mistakes. I wasn't doing everything right, but I was doing the right thing by owning it at all. See, the value of the property appreciated. My building stayed pretty full of tenants for what ended up being 10 years of ownership on that building. I had leverage and cash flow fueled by other people's money and other people's time. So even though I was doing the things wrong at times while operating the building, I was doing the right thing in a broader context by owning the fourplex at all. Investing in real estate has created more millionaires and billionaires out of ordinary people than anything else. It's not a fad. You know, people wonder, how has it created more millionaires and billionaires than anything else? Well, I'm starting to tell you exactly how right now. It's not a fad. Buy and hold real estate. I mean, people have coveted a place to live since Neanderthals lived in caves. Or was it Homo habilis that lived in caves? I don't quite remember. But anyway, if real estate investing has been so great for so long, well, then you might ask, well, then why aren't more people doing it? Why isn't everyone doing it? The answer is fear. It's lack of education. It's that people associate debt with something bad. I talked about that in the first podcast a little bit. You feel differently about debt when someone else, the tenants, are obligated to pay the debt for you. Now you're on top of debt, you know? Most people's association with debt is that they're trapped underneath it, and then debt must be a bad thing. All debt must be a bad thing. Well, I'll tell you what. I embrace debt, good debt, that I use to control more cash-producing assets. Robert Kiyosaki, the author of Rich Dad, famously says that, this is sort of a controversial statement that he makes, savers are losers, debtors are winners. Yeah, savers are losers, debtors are winners. This is the #1 selling personal finance author of all time. He's talking about those that might save money, like in a 1% bank account or certificate of deposit, versus those that use debt smartly to acquire cash-producing real estates where others pay down the debt for you. That's the kind of debt I want more of. Yeah, I seek more debt to tie up these cash-producing assets, especially when interest rates are at historic lows. I mean, if it makes sense most of the time, it certainly makes sense now when interest rates are at historic lows. You might have heard in the past some people that were destitute say that, I've got so much debt, I can hardly sleep. Well, me? You know what it is with me? I would have a hard time sleeping if I didn't have enough debt. So, I really wish I had a mentor or a voice back then when I was starting. There were no podcasts. I was doing the right things wrong at times. My mission is to be a free shortcut for you so you can be more successful than me, faster than me. I'd feel great if I could make you more successful than me, faster than me. There's so many ways that you can make out, even if things don't go perfectly. If the value of a property falls, it can still provide cash flow. For example, I owned a different rental building I bought in 2007. At the height of the market, the value of the property fell. Pretty soon, 2008 and 2009, the global financial crisis was upon us, the Great Recession. So suddenly it looked like to some people that I was doing the wrong thing, but I was invested in a real estate market that had job growth. So even for a few years, the property was worth less than what I paid for it until that value rebounded. But you know what happened when the value of that property was worth a little bit less than what I paid for it? Tenants were no longer able to qualify for loans back then. The mortgage market seized up and tightened up. Property values had gone down, so the banks had made their borrowers' criteria much more stringent then. That resulted in increased rental demand in the market, and my rent income was higher than ever, and so was my occupancy. Well, how much of a liability was it then for me to hold on to that building during those few years that the value of it was a little bit less than what I paid? Well, it was paying me better than ever to hold on to it because my cash flow was higher than ever. Cash flow, again, being the difference between the monthly income minus all of the expenses. It wasn't a problem at all unless I need to sell or refinance the building, and there's little motivation or desperation to want to sell or refinance a building when it's producing more income than it ever had previously. So if real estate investors bought in the right market during those global financial crisis years, they actually might have made out even better than ever. With income property, identifying a great market is key. The market is more important than the property. The team is more important than the property too. A nice property can be run into the ground by the wrong property manager. The team of professionals that you surround yourself with, that's more important than the property. If you're renting out a beautiful brick mansion, but it's in a swamp, the market, and it's managed by bungling circus clowns, the team, your return on investment is sunk. And that's a beautiful brick mansion. But if you're just renting out something more average or mediocre, like a 250 square foot micro apartment in Lower Manhattan, or a modest no-frills apartment unit in a bustling place like Austin, Texas, we could have a great rent income and always be occupied and give you great returns. So the market is more important than the property. I want you to educate yourself. My mission is really threefold. Number 1, educate yourself. Number 2, act. And then number 3, you're going to live like no one else can because you did what no one else would. So I can teach you how to steer a ship, but at some point you can never cross the ocean unless you have the courage to lose sight of the shore. Much of mainstream traditional financial media, they don't tell you how to win. They never tell you how to win. Rather, they just tell you how to keep yourself from losing. They tell you to pay down debt. Be debt-free. Eat beans and rice if you have to. Don't take any vacations. They don't even tell you to try to instead expand. It's all about contract, sacrifice. And now that you're sacrificing, your reward is that you conform to quote-unquote normal. Even after you're done sacrificing, you're probably not going to feel like you've won. And some might say, well, wait, I thought the iconic Millionaire Next Door, the archetype made famous by the top-selling book, I thought he got that way by driving a car until the odometer breaks, saving boatloads of money and clamping down on expenses. And I might say, okay, that's possible. First of all, who really wants to live that way? You'll never get that time back. Secondly, I don't think that a millionaire is any sort of goal to shoot for, especially for people under 50. A millionaire is typically not a wealthy person. A millionaire doesn't mean making $1 million a year. A millionaire means you take all of someone's assets, subtract all of the debts in their life, and that number that's left over, that's called their net worth, their financial net worth. That number is $1 million or more. That's not that much. Inflation dilutes the purchasing power of $1 million, and it's eroded the value of what that means. Already in some parts of the country, a millionaire is a middle-class person. With inflation, that trend is only continuing. Depending upon your age, $5 million might not be a great retirement. That might not be even adequate at all. I mean, so what? I reached the millionaire level a while ago, and it didn't have any profound impact on my life, or even a minor one. People that aim to be the millionaire next door probably never think big. On the other hand, successful people might start small, but they think big. They do the right things. Who wants to live a life where they're constantly sacrificing and cutting back when it takes so little effort to live a life of abundance? Do you want to learn about how not to lose the game, or to learn how to win the game? Think and act in expansionary terms. You cannot achieve financial success with the mindset that you grew up with. But the good news is that you are expanding your mind by listening to things like this. And here's the even better news for you. Once the mind has been expanded, it will not go back to its original state. That awareness is something that you do not lose. The awareness to be a master of money, making it follow you rather than you using your precious life resources, chasing it. Think and act in expansionary terms. How do you do that? It starts with education. Read a resource like Robert Kiyosaki's best-selling landmark book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He doesn't pay me anything to say that. It had a profound influence on me. It started it all for me. Some say knowledge is power, but no, I disagree. Knowledge alone isn't power. Knowledge plus action equals power. You can have a lot of excellent knowledge, but if you don't put it to use, it won't do you much good. But it starts with education. The most successful people didn't view education as an expense, but rather as an investment. If you don't believe in yourself enough to invest in yourself, then you've got to ask yourself, who else would invest in me? In closing today, I would offer that by educating yourself, you have not only done the right thing, you've done the right thing right. So on the next show, we're going to start turning the corner somewhat away from mindset and into some other money concepts. Until then, hey, please tell a friend about the podcast. That would mean a lot to me. The positive response from our first show was almost overwhelming. People remarking that they've never heard some of those things before. Listen to our podcast on Stitcher, and we're soon to be on iTunes. There's been a glitch there. And hey, give us a like on our Get Rich Education Facebook page and keep up with us that way too. I only have one other mission for you this week. It's to go out there and don't quit your daydream.
You've been listening to the Get Rich Education podcast, telling you what the wealthy won't tell you about real estate and investing. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to visit iTunes and leave your comments.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.